First of all, what Chicagoans have to understand is that principals want to reopen schools in a manner that is organized, safe, and thoughtful. I have a 13-year-old son who's in 8th grade, which is a pivotal year. He is an only child, and I would love to see him back in school. However, we also have to understand that the biggest obstacle to reopening schools is the management of CPS, because they failed to meet the standards set by teachers and principals for our support of a reopening plan. If you tell your child that he can't play outside until he cleans his room, but the child keeps his room a mess, who's the biggest obstacle to him playing outside? You for setting the standard, or the child for not meeting the standard? The mayor and CEO are like that child, whining about us setting standards for opening schools rather than accepting responsibility for their failure to meet those standards. One of the simplest standards we set is that any plan to reopen schools has to be co-created with teachers and principals and other stakeholders. There are two reasons for this standard. The first is that CPS has proven time and time again that they're not trustworthy, that they lack credibility. They failed to be honest and transparent so many times that a majority of teachers, principals, and parents don't trust them to come up with reopening plans behind closed doors. The examples of their dishonesty are everywhere. Look at how they promoted reopening as an equity issue for Black and brown families, and then look at how many of those same families are opting into in-person learning at rates far lower than white families. The 5 schools with the highest percentage of families choosing in-person learning are all between 64 and 82% white, the highest totals in the district, while the 5 schools with the fewest families choosing in-person learning are all 98% or more Black and Hispanic and choosing in-person learning at rates less than 10%. But then look closer. You'll see that families had to opt in via the internet, a platform that non-white families have less access to. And the district's support for the families to access that opt-in form was so inadequate that in some schools, more than half of families didn't complete the form at all. So we see clearly that contrary to the words of our mayor and CEO, this reopening plan does not seek to address inequity, it is promoting inequity. Another instance in which you can see this dishonesty occurred on November 30th in response to the questions about potential staffing issues. Janice Jackson told WBEZ, and I quote, "We've been modeling it out, and we feel pretty confident in our ability to staff in-person instruction." And so since she said she's modeling it out, we at the Principals Association did a Freedom of Information Act request asking for those staffing models. We put multiple Freedom of Information Act requests in, and all were denied. It wasn't until 2 weeks after we reached out to the HR department that they sent us a table of their record of teacher decisions of who was going to apply for a leave and who was going to come. But it was a district-wide table. It was not an analysis. Particularly, there was no individual school analysis. If you want to see if schools are staffed properly and you want to model that, then you have to look at staffing numbers at each individual school to see if schools see which schools look okay and which schools are coming up short and are going to need some staffing support. Nothing to back Jackson's claims was released to us. Their claims that they'd done modeling that would make them feel so confident that they could staff schools. They released absolutely nothing because they did no modeling. I would love for them to prove me wrong. All they'd have to do is release the models. You can also see their dishonesty in the fact that they mandated that the same teacher instruct in-person students and remote students at the same time. If I am a teacher and I have to instruct students who are at home, and I also have a group of students in front of me, then I have to tailor my instruction and set it up for one of those groups, and the other just has to follow along. And the only instruction that you can give to both of those groups, where both of them can follow along, is if you're teaching them all as if they're remote. And the district is being disingenuous and dishonest by not making it clear to parents who are signing up for in-person learning. So far, the district has failed to address remote learning inequities and lied about it, failed to plan for staffing inadequacies and lied about it, and failed to staff schools in a manner that would create a genuine in-person learning experience and are misleading parents about it. Again, would you trust your life and your children's lives with people who behave like this? The majority of principals, teachers, and the parents of the mostly Black and brown students we serve have clearly said no. CPS has breached stakeholder trust so often before and during the pandemic that few stakeholder groups have faith in any plan made by this district behind closed doors. CPS has a credibility gap that can only be bridged by direct stakeholder participation in reopening plans. It has to be understood by the press and by the public that we're not dealing with trustworthy people because of their record of doing and saying untrustworthy things. And so that's where that point comes from. It is one of many experiences that the general public might not be aware of, but we who work close to them and see their dishonesty, see their contradictions time and time again, and then when these same people who we see lying day after day, misleading people day after day, come out and say, hey, we have a safe reopening plan, it's important for you to understand why that lack of trust is there. And it's so important for the public to understand why that lack of trust is there.